My guest today is Daphne Corboz. Daphne is a dual American and French citizen who's played professionally in England, the US, and currently France with Paris FC. Daphne joins me today to talk about the financial challenges of playing in multiple countries that have different tax laws and different investment options. She also discusses how she's pursued multiple graduate degrees during her career, not only so that she has options after she stops playing, but also so that, in her words, she can maintain an identity away from the soccer field. This is my conversation with Daphne Corboz. Daphne, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm delighted to have you here. I want to start. You grew up in a soccer family. So, what did those conversations look like on the phone or in your parents' house when you were thinking about going pro and what the financial implications of that might mean for you?
Well, hi. First, thanks for having me. The financial conversations about me going pro didn't really happen, I would say. I think that women's football or women's soccer has really developed over the last 10 years. So, at the time, financially, we weren't playing soccer for financial reasons.
Sure.
We were really playing it for a love of the game. Obviously, now that has changed a bit. Well, changed a lot, actually. Um, but yeah, I would say that the conversations that I've had with my family, their priority has always been education and finding something that I love to do. So, never really focused around finding a lucrative career or around money. And when I started playing soccer professionally in 2015, I was supposed to go to medical school. So soccer was not going to be how I was going to make my money. So yeah, I don't really have any recollection of conversations we had about finances at the time.
Talk to me about that medical school decision. What was your thought process at the time when you opted to play professionally, and how has your perspective or your thinking on medical school evolved during the course of your career?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my parents' education was always the priority in my life. So I was pre-med at Georgetown, took the MCAT, applied to medical school like a regular student, was accepted into medical school at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson my senior year at Georgetown. It coincided with the end of my Georgetown soccer career and a professional contract offer from Manchester City. I was very fortunate that the dean of Rutgers, Robert Wood Johnson, was very open to me living this experience of professional soccer in England. And that kind of led to me getting a deferral. The whole process with Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson took eventually 5 years before I finally made the decision to continue playing soccer. But my first 5 years of my career were every year, it was the last game of my life.
Sure.
My parents even like flew out for games that were supposed to be the last game. And every year I was kind of like, I love soccer and can I do both? And really, Rutgers Robert Johnson was great in terms of adapting as long as they could. So it took 5 years for us to get to a point where like I needed to take the MCAT again.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, my thought process regarding medical school, I mean, Manchester City, when I was deciding, they knew I was choosing between medical school and signing with them, so they were very generous and made it so that I could pursue a master's in Manchester. So I pursued a master's degree in biomedical science. And then that also helped with getting deferrals with medical school because I was still active in the medical field. And then as time went on, when I eventually had to make the decision, it's medical school or soccer, and I did not have the possibility to extend, it was a really tough decision because
Mhm.
I would have never dreamed to have had 5 years of a soccer career. Initially it was 2 years, then it was 3 years. So 5 years was huge. I got to play for Manchester City. I got to play for Sky Blue, which was my hometown team. And I got to play in France, where my parents are from. So it was really a full career and I couldn't have dreamed of more. Eventually, I made the decision because soccer is temporary. We can only play when we're young,
Sure.
and medical school will always be there, I hope. And that if I'm really determined, I can retake the MCAT, reapply to medical school, and hopefully get in again. Um, so that's kind of how medical school, the decision went 5 years ago. Since then, I am pursued a second master's degree in cardiology and am doing a PhD in cardiology that I'm finishing up this year. So I've continued being active in the medical field. Will I go back to medical school? It's an option. Maybe I will retake the MCAT. I'm kind of leaving all options open, so I
Sure.
don't really know yet
Sure.
if I'll go back.
A lot of players have talked about how the end of their careers can catch them off guard a little bit, and they're not necessarily uh, mentally prepared for what type of other career might come next. Will you talk a little bit about how pursuing those degrees over the course of your playing career has potentially helped you not feel as anxious, perhaps, about the end of your playing career?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, pursuing something alongside my soccer career has been wonderful in many ways. It has offered me a security in case of an injury, in case that I fell out of love with soccer.
Hmm.
I knew I always had something. It also allowed me to make decisions in my soccer career that were not dependent on, I need another contract, I need money. Um, so that was also great. And then I think there's an aspect to like being a soccer player. We have time, and being my personality and having all through my life done sports and school, I would have been, it's hard not for me not to find like have free time and not have an activity alongside. That being said, it is also a disadvantage when you are, I think the activity I chose, and that doing a PhD and master's degrees in science that requires a lot of lab time, um, is quite straining on the body, and doing that alongside a professional career that has increasing demands and need for recovery is definitely not easy either. I
Yeah.
don't regret it at all, but it is difficult.
How would you advise players on that dynamic? And I asked this question in the context of Ashley Hatch on the last episode was talking about building her own business and how she has felt like through much of her career, it was more or less looked down upon for players to pursue other things while they were playing professionally because the idea was that like every possible minute more or less should be spent preparing for that next training session or the next match. How do you think about that balance, and what would you say to other players to guide them on that choice?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, the development of women's soccer has been really rapid and has been huge. In that, when I was first starting to play, people needed to do something on the side. I mean, in the NWSL, you were only paid the 6 months that you were playing.
Hmm.
So people had jobs in the off season, which had a lot of problems too, because they could only have a job that was 6 months, and that could also allow them to train and be fit for the following season.
Yep.
Um, in France, people worked alongside their careers. So trainings were a bit later at night. So I think every country has its own way of dealing with having two activities. But I think now that's not the case, because you can be financially independent with a soccer career. Um, how would I recommend people balance it? I mean, in the US, we're quite fortunate. We're used to the university system where we're balancing sports
Yeah.
and school.
Yeah.
So pretty much when you're a rookie, you're fresh off of doing that. I think it is important. I think it's important to have an identity outside of soccer. And unfortunately, careers aren't guaranteed. I've been very fortunate to have over a 10-year career, but um, that's not a given for everybody. So it's important to have something after soccer is done, and so that you don't have that stress of what am I going to do,
Yeah.
and am I able financially to do it?
Yeah. Last year, you opted to re-sign with Paris FC through 2027. Will you talk a little bit about how you evaluated that choice against other potential options, especially in the context of how much the women's game has changed in recent years with something like the collective bargaining agreement in the NWSL?
Yeah, I think the decision to stay at Paris FC was for me a no-brainer. I'm extremely happy at the club. We play Champions League. I learn every day. We have an excellent coach. Our team is great. So I think I've gotten this message across that I don't really make decisions based on money, and I'm fortunate to not have to.
Yeah,
But I also think there is something to be said about making decisions for places that you feel good, because if you feel good, you can play well, and that also leads to maybe having more contracts in the long run. And if you optimize just for finances right away, maybe you aren't guaranteed to have a long career.
sure.
Um, Obviously, the CBA in the NWSL is great. I mean, it's an example for the rest of women's soccer in the world. I will say there are differences between the countries. I play here in France, where we have a lot more security, I would say. I mean, health insurance, retirement, social security is all covered by the government. So salaries are lower, and there is less this necessity to save compared to the US. Um, so that is a little bit different in terms of optimizing for money when
Right.
making decisions. But yeah, so my decision to stay at Paris FC was more for a global project of football in my life.
Sure. Perhaps not for you specifically, but more generally among teammates or other players in the league. Do you feel like there's ever a sense that as certain leagues around the world increase their standards at different rates than other leagues, that players feel some like pressure or like a grass is greener on the other side type of idea that like, oh, maybe I should be over there where they just leapt ahead in whatever they're now offering because things tend to change so fast.
Yeah, I think obviously when there are securities in a league, that adds to the desire to go to that league. Unfortunately, though, not everyone can play
Right.
in the top league. So
Right.
that is going to be the number one limiting factor. And then the second um, limiting factor will just be that you have to make a decision for you and what fits best for you. I mean, there's many questions when you're choosing a club: the style of play, the coaching staff. Maybe you want an experience learning a new language, experiencing a new league. Um, there's a lot of different factors. Obviously, the protection of the players is very important, but I think there are, even if standards maybe aren't as good as in the NWSL, they're still very high in leagues across the world.
Hmm. As a dual French and American citizen, how have you navigated the very challenging dynamic of different tax laws and retirement accounts and all the other financial aspects of um, different countries' systems?
Yeah, I mean, I have not figured this out at all. This has been a real struggle. I've played in three different countries. I am a taxable citizen of two different
Hmm.
countries. Um, yeah, I have a pension that Manchester City opened for me automatically in England that is still active. I have a bit of finances everywhere I've played. That has been very difficult to figure out. And also not knowing where I will live long term
Hmm.
makes it even harder. Um, I currently, concerning taxes, I currently live in a country that um, has a high tax rate. And so I don't owe taxes in the US because I mean, from my understanding, is that if um, you are taxed more in the country you are working in than you would have been in the US, then you don't owe taxes in the US. That I still file taxes to the US every year,
Sure.
but because the money I'm paying here in France is higher than what I would have paid in the US, then I don't owe any taxes in the US. Regarding investments, that has been very difficult. The system here in France is a system that I can't even say, I was going to say is more unfamiliar to me than the system in the US, but I actually don't know anything about finances. So that has been really difficult to navigate, is how it works here, and if investing here, is that how do you deal with it tax wise? And also, if you were to move, is that money blocked? There's just a lot of questions, and it's been very difficult to navigate. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and I still haven't figured it out.
In all these different stops along the way, who have you most often turned to for guidance on these types of questions? And do you feel like, the players in Manchester when you were there, or, in Paris now, have had the resources that they need to answer many of these questions?
I think having the foreignness of being in a foreign country changes a bit, and people's objectives are different. So my friends, whether it be in England or here in France, like their first thing maybe is investing in an apartment, which I didn't know if I was going to stay long term. So I think having the objectives are different. So it's been hard to really talk to somebody that is in my shoes. So I've kind of had to navigate this on my own. And as I've mentioned, like finances hasn't always been hasn't been my priority. So I save my money, and I definitely have not made the best financial decisions in terms of investments and things like that.
What financial question or topic seems to continue to hang over your head most often, and that you constantly wonder about, or wish you were better at?
Yeah, the thing I spend the most time over regarding my finances is how and where to invest my money. Is definitely, yeah, the hardest thing I've had to do financially, and I still haven't figured out the best solution.
Is that more of the foreign country dynamic, or is it related to how long you think you'll be playing professionally, and what a medical career or something else might look like? Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, the hardest part for that is definitely being in a foreign country.
Okay.
And not knowing where you will reside long term, and trying to figure out a system here in France is definitely the hardest part, because um, we definitely make enough money, or at least at my club, we make enough money in France to live very comfortably and invest our money. So that has been the hardest for me.
Your sister Rachel also plays in France. Is it helpful to have someone you're so close to sharing these same types of issues and dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely the person I go to. I will say, I don't know, we'll have to get her side of it, but as the elder sister, I feel like I'm more the one trying to
Yeah.
guide what we do. And unfortunately, I feel like I'm leading her a bit astray.
Right. Right. If you could go back and make any different financial decisions, either coming out of college or in more recent years, what might they be?
Yeah, I don't want to be repetitive over this, but I probably would try and dig a bit deeper into like what the contracts actually mean. I mean, I now have a pension in England. I have a pension with the NWSL, and I have most of my money. I've been playing here for 8 years, so most of my money is here in France. So trying to navigate that would, and like optimize that, I would say, because I mean, it is like the money is still there, but trying to optimize that would definitely be the one thing I would have loved to look into earlier. Yeah.
I often ask about how someone in your position might advise other players, but what would you say to um, leagues or club owners about what a better system might be for making sure players don't find themselves with the type of questions that you've had.
Yeah, I have done a little bit of work with UEFA. One of the things that I would suggest, and I also don't know if this is possible, I don't know anything about international banking, but if a governing body like UEFA or even maybe FIFA, that way it includes the whole world,
Hmm.
um, if they were able to have a system for people to invest their money in and have a sort of pension system that was universal. And again, I don't know, maybe this is completely not possible, but I think it would be really, really useful. And also just explaining to people, having resources that explain to people how all this works, I think would be really beneficial. That would be the one thing that I would have loved to have, but as I said, I don't know if it's feasible.
Do you have any sense from your conversations with them whether anything like that already exists for the men's game, and it's a matter of bringing more resources to the women's game, or does this seem like an issue that's just neglected entirely?
From my understanding, I don't think there's something in place in the men's game. Um, Obviously, the men have a lot more financial resources, which leads to having a lot more people that want to get involved with them, which is
Sure.
also not always a very good thing,
Yeah.
because it's not always for their benefit. But I think the sums of money that they are dealing with forces them from a very young age to optimize and find a best solution, even though we have heard stories of that not always being the case for all the players.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know finances do not drive your decisions, but what what does financial stability and success look like for you in your mind in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I know the importance of money. I don't want to, yeah, it is important. It is very important.
It's a personal
I
finance podcast, so I have to ask these
Yeah,
questions.
yeah, and um I'm very fortunate to have made good money playing soccer. Like it's incredible. And I'm also fortunate to have been able to prepare my life for afterwards. And I think initially I had said that I thought that my career would be a year long and 2 years long. So
Hmm.
that has definitely had an effect on how I dealt with my finances, I would say. Because before this wasn't a way that I was going to make money, and now it's been 10 years and I've made some money. What I would say financial success is to me, though, is that I just want to be able to, I don't have a very flashy lifestyle, but I would like to live my life comfortably and be able to do whatever I want without being worried about the financial aspect. So I think that would be financial success, but I don't know if that's a strict definition that you were maybe looking for.
No, 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 all good. I want to follow up on one thing you said. If you had been able to know that your career would last 5+ years, 10 years, would those financial choices that you made have looked much different?
I'm not somebody that spends a lot of my money, so it
Okay.
wouldn't have, but I do think it would have looked differently. I mean, everything would have looked differently if I had told myself that I'm going to play soccer for as long as I can, um, from the start. My even the career choices I made with from clubs to club would have been different for sure. The first 5 years when I thought I was going to medical school, I was optimizing to play the maximum amount of soccer.
Okay.
So I played 2 years at Manchester City and then I went to the NWSL because at the time the seasons were
Sure.
opposites.
Yeah.
So then that optimized. And then I was in the NWSL and there was a 6 month off season. So I came to play in France on loan. So everything was just like optimizing and it allowed me to have amazing experiences. Um, but maybe I would have stayed longer at Manchester City if it wasn't the case, or maybe I would have stayed longer in the NWSL. So yeah, I definitely think I have absolutely no regrets because I love the career I've had and I've had amazing experiences, but um that medical school, going to medical school was definitely a um, big factor in all of the decisions I was making.
Mm-hmm. Somewhat related to this, how would longer contract lengths impact these types of decisions for someone in your position as there's more investment in the women's game, and some contracts on average have longer durations than they previously did? How do you think that would impact choices and financial options for players like you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously having longer term contracts, I think for my case wouldn't have changed much because there was still medical school coming every year. But in general, I think it gives a financial security that is really important. I think it also allows you to feel more settled into maybe an area, and have a bit of a guarantee. And maybe investing means buying the apartment you're living in.
Right.
So yeah, I think it would be ideal to have longer contracts. Yeah.
Okay. All right, last question. What is your favorite thing to spend money on, and what do you most often regret spending money on?
My favorite thing to spend money on is probably trips, vacations, experiences, I would say. Um, and the what I regret the most spending money on, probably food.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Wish you all the best.